Okay, you mentioned at the start of this interview, we have three big uncertainties over Hong Kong, right? You have a recession, obviously. There's a pandemic. There are the riots and the street protests from last year. That was one of them. If you assume that the virus story goes away, Ronnie, do you think, given the political environment here in Hong Kong, because of the national security law, do you think that also addresses that other uncertainty, stability on the streets of Hong Kong?
Oh, absolutely. Without the national security law today, Hong Kong is in serious trouble. I've never seen Hong Kong. I grew up here, and I've never seen the streets as messy as it was last year. How can you dump gasoline on a stranger and set him on fire? It's crazy. And Hong Kong, we have never seen anything like that. And the national security law is to restore the one country, two system framework. And I just don't see any other way. Any other way has a lot more problem than the national security law. Those people who were demonstrating against the Hong Kong government and the Beijing government, they asked for it. We are supposed to legislate ourselves, called Article 23 for the national security by Hong Kong. And we can do it for the last 23 years. So how can any country to have a territory within that country that does not be covered under some kind of security law? I mean, consider the US, consider the UK, consider anywhere else. The national security law is always there. Hong Kong has almost none. That is an unacceptable situation. And since the Hong Kong people refuse to do it themselves, Beijing is left with no choice. If not, the Hong Kong's economy is going to suffer. Imagine, social stability was gone, personal security was gone. How can business exist? So the national security law is the only thing that can be done in order to restore some form of peace in Hong Kong.
Okay, Ronnie, it is a two-sided story, of course, in terms of the political events that are unfolding in Hong Kong. Let's bring it back to the retail story. You know better than most that retailers are being hammered in Hong Kong. Retail sales falling 24%. Will you give your tenants a rent cut?
First of all, there's no two sides. Fact is the fact. Let's face the facts. If you're afraid to face it, too bad. As far as retail in Hong Kong is concerned, everybody has to be realistic. And we are realistic, and we have to give some rent relief, but only on a selective basis. On the mainland, we're across the board cut for our retail tenants in the base rent. But in Hong Kong, we're very selective because some businesses are doing fantastic. Why bother? But other people that are in need and that we want to keep them, surely very, very realistic to work with them.
Ronnie, 500,000 people voted in the primaries. Are you dismissing their views?
No, it's not that I'm dismissing their views. Many of those people are the ones that were marching on the streets. They were the ones who were causing trouble. And I feel unsafe for the first time ever living in Hong Kong for the last many decades. Do you want your son or your daughter to live in an unsafe environment where he or she walks out of the street? What do you say? Are you safe in Hong Kong?
Now,
last half of last year?
Right. Okay. I think no one is doubting that safety and the scenes that we saw in Hong Kong last year were in a lot of ways disruptive. I also think it's accurate to say that that group that was causing trouble, we're not talking of the 2 million people, Ronnie, 2 million people that marched peacefully. I would imagine the majority of the 500,000 people that Tom was mentioning earlier that voted in the primaries were the ones also causing physical harm and physical trouble and posing that sort of fear. And you and I understand, of course, that these are scenes you don't see every day, but equally as well, there is a part of the population here, Ronnie, and sorry to get into politics, that want their voice heard. What do big businesses in Hong Kong, like yourself, tell those people who feel marginalized, that they can't seem to see a future, that they can't climb the economic ladder? It is, after all, one country, two systems. It is also one Hong Kong, Ronnie.
Well, one Hong Kong is part of the one China. Let's get that fact right first. I think that the situation you described about such as lack of opportunities, you're seeing exactly the same thing on Portland streets in the United States. There are always situations of that sort, right? But America, there is the national security law. And look at what President Trump has done. He has sent in the federal agents, right? In Hong Kong, there's no such thing. And when you have a society that has no security law, no national security law, that is an unacceptable situation. If Hong Kong people had legislated in 2003, there would not be today. They asked for it. I'm sorry to say that. If we had legislated before, anytime in the 23 years, there won't be the national security law by Beijing today.
Ronnie, we're out of time. We could continue this obviously, and obviously we wish do come back on the show so we can continue the conversation. Ronnie Chan, thank you so much for coming on the show.